I called a plumber for a simple leak. 8 hours later, my house was a war zone. Hey Reddit. I need to share this because I still can't believe what happened. What was supposed to be a simple plumbing repair turned into the single craziest, most chaotic day of my life. 8 hours later, my kitchen was destroyed. I met 2 government agents and found something hidden in my house that I never expected. Buckle up, because this is going to be a long one. So, let me start by giving some background. I'm Mike, 31, and my fiancée Anna, 29, and I just bought our first house a few months ago. We were so excited to finally have a place of our own, and despite some minor things to fix, the house has been great, until last week. It all began with a slow leak under the kitchen sink. No big deal, right? I noticed it while cleaning up after dinner one night. A few drops every few seconds, no flooding or anything. Being the optimist I am, I thought, I'll deal with it later. Fast forward a few days, and later became urgent. The trickling leak had transformed into a constant drip, and the cabinet under the sink was starting to get damp. Naturally, I attempted to fix it myself because how hard could it be? Well, turns out it's harder than you think when you have no idea what you're doing. I spent an hour fumbling with wrenches and tightening random bolts, but the drip kept coming. Annoyed and defeated, I did what any sensible person would do. I called in a professional. I found Dave online. He had great reviews. People said he was reliable, fast, and didn't overcharge. That's all I needed to hear. I called him up around 9 a.m. on a Friday morning, and he answered immediately. After explaining the situation, Dave said he could be over in about 30 minutes. Perfect, right? I'm thinking, this will be fixed before lunchtime. Anna had already left for work, so I had the day to myself. Dave showed up right on time. He was exactly what you'd expect from a plumber, grizzled, probably mid-40s, with a friendly but serious vibe. He had his tool bag slung over one shoulder and greeted me with a nod before heading straight for the sink. Shouldn't take long at all, he said, crouching down to assess the damage. Famous last words. About 30 minutes in, I heard Dave muttering to himself. Curious, I walked over to check on him. He was still under the sink, fiddling with a wrench and looking a bit confused. You've got a bit more going on here than just a loose pipe, he said. Looks like there's some rusted out sections behind the sink. I'm gonna have to replace a portion of the pipe. It'll take a little longer, but I've got the parts in my van. At this point, I wasn't too concerned. Sure, it might take longer, but at least it was getting fixed. I gave him the go-ahead, and he disappeared to grab his tools from the van. I went back to my home office to catch up on some emails. Little did I know, this was just the beginning. About an hour later, I'm on a Zoom call when I hear the sound of rushing water. Not the gentle trickle of the leak I'd been dealing with, but the unmistakable sound of gushing water. My heart sank. I quickly muted myself and ran to the kitchen, where I found Dave in full panic mode. Water was pouring out from under the sink, flooding the kitchen floor. Mike! I need to shut off the main water line. He yelled over the noise, frantically trying to hold back the deluge with a towel. I had no idea where the shut-off valve was. In my panic, I started opening random cabinets, hoping for some kind of miracle. We finally found the valve in the basement. Dave turned it off, but not before the water had soaked through the kitchen and started spreading into the living room. The hardwood floors were ruined, and the water was creeping dangerously close to the expensive Persian rug Anna had insisted on getting for the living room. By the time we stopped the flood, the damage was already done. The entire kitchen floor was a swamp, and the living room carpet was completely soaked. I was standing there with towels and a mop, trying to stem the tide, while Dave just shook his head, muttering apologies. I'm really sorry, man. The valve wasn't fully shut off. I didn't notice it at first. I'll fix this, don't worry. At this point, I was trying to stay calm. What was I supposed to do? Kick him out? He was already in the middle of the job, and I had no idea how to fix the mess. So, I nodded and let him continue. He promised that he'd not only fix the leak but would also help dry out the water damage. I should have cut my losses and called it quits right then. Just as Dave was getting back under the sink, Anna came home for her lunch break. The look on her face when she saw the kitchen was priceless. She walked in, saw the standing water, the towels everywhere, and Dave half covered in water himself. Her expression quickly went from shock to anger. "What the hell happened?" she asked, looking from me to Dave like we'd been throwing a party in her absence. I explained the whole situation, and Dave, to his credit, apologized profusely. He told Anna the leak was worse than expected and he'd had to shut off the main water line, which caused the flooding. "I'm taking care of it, don't worry," he said. Anna didn't look convinced. After making sure nothing else was about to flood, Anna gave me a "we'll talk about this later" look and left for work, but I could tell she wasn't happy. And who could blame her? With the water shut off and most of the flooding under control, Dave went back to work. I retreated to my office to get some more work done, though I couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get worse. And, of course, they did. A couple of hours later, I heard Dave's voice again. "Hey, Mike. Can you come here for a sec?" he called from the kitchen. I walked in to find him standing next to the sink, looking serious. He was holding a section of pipe that was completely corroded. "The problem's bigger than I thought," he said. "There's damage to the pipes inside the wall. I'm gonna have to cut through the drywall to get to it." Now, I wasn't thrilled about the idea of him cutting into my walls, but at this point, I felt like I didn't have much of a choice. The leak clearly wasn't going to stop on its own, and if there was more damage, it needed to be fixed. So, reluctantly, I told him to go ahead. Dave grabbed his saw and started cutting into the drywall behind the sink. What started as a small hole quickly turned into a much larger section being removed. He wasn't just cutting a small patch, he was opening up a whole section of the wall. I watched in horror as more and more drywall came down, revealing the old, rusted pipes beneath. By now, my kitchen was starting to look like a construction zone. There were tools scattered everywhere, dust coating the counters, and the smell of wet drywall hanging in the air. I could only imagine what Anna was going to say when she came home later. About halfway through ripping out the wall, Dave suddenly stopped. "Mike, come here. You've got to see this," he said, his voice sounding oddly tense. I walked over to where he was standing, and that's when I saw it, a strange, old-looking metal pipe hidden behind the drywall. But it wasn't connected to any of the other plumbing. "What is that?" I asked, leaning in closer. The pipe was small, about 2 feet long and capped at both ends. It looked ancient, covered in rust and grime. Dave stared at it for a moment, then reached out to grab it. "I don't think this is part of the plumbing," he said, turning it over in his hands. "It looks like some kind of container." Now, at this point, my curiosity was piqued. This wasn't just any pipe, it felt like we'd stumbled onto something strange, maybe even valuable. "Should we open it?" Dave asked, looking at me like we were characters in an Indiana Jones movie. Without thinking it through, I nodded. Dave found a wrench and started twisting the cap on one end of the pipe. It took some effort, but after a few minutes, the cap finally came loose. A strange, musty smell wafted out of the pipe as Dave tipped it upside down. A few old, crumpled documents slid out and landed on the floor. They were yellowed with age, and the writing on them was in a language I didn't recognize. One of the papers had a date written in the corner, 1912. "Holy crap," I whispered. "What is this?" Dave and I both stared at the documents, unsure what to make of them. They looked old, really old, but what were they doing hidden behind the walls of my kitchen? And who put them there? As Dave and I stood there staring at the papers, a million questions started running through my mind. Who had hidden these documents? Why were they behind the walls? And most importantly, what did they say? Neither of us could make heads or tails of the writing. It wasn't in English, and it wasn't any language I recognized. "Maybe it's some kind of old code," Dave suggested, flipping one of the pages over. There were strange symbols mixed in with the text, like something out of a spy novel. I decided to take a picture of the documents and text them to Anna. She was a history buff, and I figured she might be able to make sense of them, or at least know someone who could. But before I could even hit send, there was a knock at the door. I opened the door to find two men in suits standing on my porch. They were both tall, with dark sunglasses and those stereotypical government agent looks that you only see in movies. One of them flashed a badge, though I didn't get a good look at it, and said they were from some kind of historical preservation agency. "We need to speak with you about something you found in your home," the taller agent said, his tone polite but firm. I stood there, completely dumbfounded. How did they know we'd found something? We hadn't told anyone yet. Before I could ask any questions, the agent stepped inside, walking straight into the kitchen like they knew exactly where to go. Dave and I exchanged confused looks, but we didn't say anything as they made a beeline for the documents on the floor. One of the agents knelt down, picked up the papers, and gave a small nod to the other. "We'll be taking these with us," he said, already folding the documents into a small, black briefcase. "Wait, what? You can't just take those," I said, stepping forward. But the agents weren't having any of it. "This is a matter of national security," the other agent said, in a tone that brooked no argument. Before I could protest, they were already heading for the door. I stood there, completely stunned, as they walked out of the house, leaving Dave and me with more questions than answers. After the agents left, Dave and I were just standing there, speechless. What had just happened? My head was spinning. I wanted to chase after them, demand more answers, but a part of me, call it survival instinct, knew that wasn't a great idea. These guys were clearly not to be messed with. "Man, what the hell was that about?" Dave finally said, breaking the silence. "I have no idea," I replied. But whatever those documents were, they definitely didn't want us looking at them. As strange as the whole situation was, there wasn't much we could do at that point. The documents were gone, and I wasn't about to go up against some shady government agency to get them back. Dave, being the professional he was, offered to finish the plumbing job despite the bizarre turn of events. So, he got back to work. He repaired the pipes behind the wall and promised to come back the next day to fix the drywall. But the whole time, I couldn't stop thinking about those documents and what they might have meant. Later that evening, Anna came home from work and found me standing in the middle of the half-demolished kitchen. She took one look at the mess inside. "What happened now?" I told her everything, about the flood, the hidden pipe, the strange documents, and the agents who came and took them. To my surprise, she didn't seem nearly as freaked out as I was. Instead, she looked thoughtful, almost like she wasn't as surprised as I'd expected. "I'll make a few calls," she said, grabbing her phone. "I know someone who might know something about this." That's when I started to wonder if Anna knew more than she was letting on. Over the next few days, things got weirder. Anna didn't mention the documents again, but she was spending a lot of time on the phone, talking in hushed tones. Every time I asked her about it, she brushed me off, saying it was nothing. Meanwhile, Dave came back and finished the drywall, but the whole mood in the house had shifted. There was this eerie feeling, like we were being watched. I kept catching glimpses of unfamiliar cars parked on our street, and every time I went to check, they'd drive off. Then, a week later, something strange happened. I was cleaning out the cabinet under the sink when I found it, a single sheet of paper, crumpled up and hidden in the back corner. It was part of the documents the agents had taken. The paper was written in English this time, and it had just one sentence on it. "We'll be watching." I don't know who left it there or what it means, but I'm pretty sure this is far from over.